大家好. Good evening. I noticed that today was Chinese Language Day, which is a day that the UN set aside to promote and encourage the study and learning of Chinese here in America and around the world. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to come in and make another video out of my China library. So to start off with, I'll show you a couple of the first books that I would have read and which would have introduced me to Chinese, Mandarin specifically, when I was young, about 7 or 8 years old, in the middle to late 90s, later 90s. And so yeah, let's just get right into it and see how it goes. This first book is by the famous Italian linguist Mario Pei, and it's entitled Talking Your Way Around the World: Profiles of the World's Chief Languages. And this is a third edition, copyright 1971, though the original copyright looks like it was in 1943. This book is special to me because as a child, in about 4th grade, I began studying Spanish and realized that I was interested in languages. And so I went to our local library and found this very book there and started poring over it, absolutely just enjoying it to the hilt. The various chapters on French and Spanish and German, and then toward the back of the book it had a chapter on the introduction of Asian languages, and the next one was Chinese. The next chapter was about Chinese. And so I pored over that. I didn't have any, the book didn't come with audio files or cassette tapes or anything like that, no CDs. And this was before I had access for sure to the internet, before it became readily available like it is today. And so I just had to go off of reading the transcriptions, the romanization, and try my hand at it. So next time that my family and I went into a Chinese American restaurant to eat, on the way out, upon leaving, I told the waitress, I said, 谢谢, 多谢, and 再见. Thank you very much, and goodbye. And her face lit up like a Christmas tree. And I realized that I'd made a connection, that she had understood what I'd said, even though I hadn't pronounced it correctly necessarily. And, you know, I was this basically a little kid trying to speak Chinese. And so yeah, that was probably my first interaction with the native speaker, and it worked. You know, it gave me the boost I needed at that point to keep going, and my fascination ramped up from there, and I continued to read books and articles, newspaper articles, books, you know, anything I could get my hands on about China and the Chinese language. And around that same time, I became aware of a company called China Books and Periodicals, based out of, I think it was Beijing. and I wrote a letter to them. There was an address, and so I wrote a letter to them and asked for information, more information about their company, and that asked for a catalog, and they sent me a book catalog, and I poured over that thing, and found a book that I wanted. Seemed something I would enjoy, called Urban Chinese by Gerald Scott Clayman, Mandarin in 21st Century China. And I began reading that thing from cover to cover, and by this time I think I may have had a few CDs somebody had given me, or anyway, I was able to get a bit more of a pronunciation, auditory help with pronunciation, and of course, that just helps speed up the process and make the learning more enjoyable when you can hear the correct way to pronounce the tones, the four tones of Mandarin. And as I continued reading, I found out about a man named John D. Francis, who was a professor at the University of Hawaii. And his name kept popping up in all the books and articles I was reading about Chinese language and things. And I had opportunity to go to a university library, and I found a copy of what I learned was one of his most noteworthy books about the Chinese language, called The Chinese Language, Fact and Fantasy by John D. Francis. 中国语文. And there again, I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book, and it was a bit more detailed, a bit more on the having to do with the deeper aspects of language learning, the linguistics and other notable features behind the scenes, instead of just your basic, ni hao, ni hao ma, hello, how are you, and other normal regular phrases. And so it gave me an in-depth, one of my first in-depth looks into Mandarin as a more of the technical side of the language and behind the scenes, as I've already said. And some years later, I was privileged to find a used copy of that book in good condition at a used bookstore and snapped it up. I'm happy to have my own copy of it, as well as the one I referenced earlier of Talking Your Way Around the World. Some years ago I found that one as well at a used bookstore, and was happy to find that because that was one of the first, if not the very first book that I had ever read about Chinese language. And as the UN, as I said, has designated this Chinese Language Day, and also in a broader sense that of multilingualism, I have this book as well in my China library called The Languages of China by S. Robert Ramsey. And it was copywritten in 1987, Princeton University Press. And it deals with the other languages of China, not just as we think of it as Chinese as Mandarin or Cantonese, but the other language varieties and language families that make up the full country of China. And such languages as those in like Xinjiang or Tibet, where they're part of the country of China as a whole, but they have their own cultures and language systems and language families that they come from to make up the full over the full broad Chinese language system. And I have enjoyed reading that book as well and learning about the varieties and dialects of Chinese as well as the other languages, and how that there's no there's not just one Chinese language. There's differences in depending on what region you come from, whether you come from the north or you come from the south or you're in the middle of the country. The dialect changes, and so yeah, I just thought I would post this in recognition of the day, and as well as the fact that it's April and it's a lot of things going on having to do with books and literature, and it's also April is Poetry Month, I believe, so perhaps I'll post a video having to do with some of the books of poetry and things I enjoy with that. And it's also, I think, Library Week or Library Day was last week or something a while back. And upcoming is the Indie Bookstore Day, I believe, last Saturday of the month. And so yeah, a lot of things related around language and literature this month, which is kind of cool because it's also my birthday month. And so it just kind of seemed to sync up and jive pretty well. So, hope perhaps you've enjoyed this and maybe even learned something. So, until next time, 再见。